Imagine you're a logistics coordinator at a furniture company in Omaha. It's October 2021, 11 years on the job, and nothing about Tuesday morning looks unusual. You open the shipping tracker, find 43 containers somewhere in the Pacific, and expect them to arrive on schedule. The holidays are 6 weeks away, but the tracker isn't showing movement towards shore. The containers are anchored 18 miles off Long Beach, sitting on ships waiting for a berth. They've been waiting for 9 days. 87 other ships are in the same line. Nobody is giving you a timeline. The entire supply chain feeding the United States runs through a 6-mile stretch of California coastline, not distributed across a dozen ports, not spread across multiple regions. 2 ports, 1 complex. When both of them jammed in the fall of 2021, the shockwave moved through the economy the way a cardiac event moves through a body. Fast, invisible at first, then everywhere at once. So how does a container ship stuck off Long Beach raise the price of a sofa in Columbus? It starts with geography, and the decisions geography made before anyone alive today was born. The Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach together process roughly 40% of all containerized imports entering the United States by sea. 6,000 container ships annually. Tens of millions of steel boxes carrying electronics, clothing, furniture, pharmaceutical inputs, car parts. A significant portion of what fills American homes and factories arrives via these 2 adjacent harbors before spreading across the continent. The next largest gateways, Savannah, New York, and New Jersey, Houston, handle real volumes, but none approaches Southern California's scale, and none has the accumulated logistics ecosystem that makes the 2 ports function as the country's primary intake valve for Pacific trade. The concentration isn't accidental, and it isn't a policy choice. It's the endpoint of a logic that started in the 1870s and has been compounding ever since. Start with geography. It explains more than you'd expect. The western coastline of the United States has multiple natural harbors: San Francisco Bay, Puget Sound in Washington, the Los Angeles Basin. Any of them could theoretically anchor a major import gateway. Most didn't, not at the scale Southern California reached. The reason Los Angeles ended up at the center of American import geography has nothing to do with its harbor. It has everything to do with the Cajon Pass. 90 miles to the northeast, the San Bernardino Mountains form a nearly continuous wall between the coast and the interior of the continent. The Cajon Pass cuts through that wall, and when transcontinental railroads were being laid in the 1870s and 1880s, this route gave engineers a viable path from the Pacific coast to the high desert, to Utah, to Chicago. Once the connection existed, cargo arriving in San Pedro Bay could reach the Midwest in days. The port wasn't serving Los Angeles, it was serving the country. San Francisco had a spectacular natural harbor, but difficult interior rail geography. Seattle had Puget Sound, but was, in 1885, a timber town rather than a distribution hub. Los Angeles had something genuinely rare in the geography of trade: deep water, flat coastal plain capable of holding enormous industrial infrastructure, and a mountain passage directly connecting it to the national rail network. That combination locked in the outcome before anyone consciously chose it. Warehouses followed the rail connections. Chassis fleets followed the warehouses. Labor pools followed the freight. Customs infrastructure followed the volume. Every layer of investment made the location more attractive and rerouting more expensive. Every year of accumulated relationships, permits, and physical assets deepened the lock-in, geography converting itself into institutional inertia over a century. Geographic advantage alone doesn't turn a port into something irreplaceable. Something else had to happen. In the 1960s and 1970s, containerization transformed global shipping. Standardized steel boxes made loading and unloading fast, mechanized, and vastly cheaper. The side effect nobody fully anticipated: containerization rewarded scale massively. Larger ships meant lower cost per box. Lower cost per box meant volume concentrated on fewer routes. More volume through fewer routes meant more infrastructure built at those locations, making them cheaper still. Carriers ordered larger ships. Larger ships needed deeper harbors and longer berths. Most American ports on the Atlantic and Gulf coasts had to dredge and rebuild to accommodate them. Expensive, slow, often contested through years of environmental review. Los Angeles and Long Beach already had the depth. They didn't keep pace with the new generation of vessels. They were ahead of it. I went through the major carrier route announcements from the 1980s and 1990s. The pattern was consistent. When a carrier chose between investing in upgrades at a mid-sized port or routing to Southern California won. Every time. Better infrastructure, faster turnaround, superior rail connections inland. Aggregated across thousands of choices over 4 decades, the result was a concentration no one designed and no one quite noticed reaching critical mass until it already had. That should have been a warning. Nobody treated it as one. The warning actually arrived 19 years before 2021. In September 2002, a labor dispute between the Pacific Maritime Association and the International Longshore and Warehouse Union shut down both ports for 10 days. West Coast docks went dark. Ships sat offshore. The disruption cost the economy an estimated $2 billion. The Bush administration invoked the Taft-Hartley Act to force the ports back open. Analysts wrote reports. Congressional committees held hearings. The structural concentration was flagged explicitly as a risk, that a single labor negotiation in Southern California could hold the entire country's import supply hostage. The ports reopened. Volumes grew. Reports were filed. Within 2 years, the lesson had effectively been forgotten, because the ports worked, and when they work, the concentration is invisible. That's where the story gets strange. The warning wasn't just ignored. Ignoring it was rational. By 2015, the understanding that the U.S. import system was dangerously concentrated in Southern California wasn't a secret in logistics circles. Port Authority studies, Congressional Research Service analyses, insurance industry risk assessments, they all described it. Some flagged it explicitly as a structural vulnerability. Nothing changed. The risk was real. The alternative was more expensive. A manufacturer rerouting cargo from Los Angeles to Savannah or Houston would pay more per container, sometimes significantly more, once longer transit times and less developed inland logistics were factored in. Competitors still using Southern California would have a cost advantage. No individual actor had an incentive to absorb a private cost for a diffuse collective benefit. The failure pattern here is familiar. Efficiency concentrates. Concentration creates fragility. The fragility is invisible until a crisis makes it visible, and by the time the crisis arrives, the concentration is so embedded that dismantling it costs more than the crisis itself. In the fall of 2021, it stopped being invisible. Ships began anchoring offshore as berths filled. At peak, more than 80 vessels waited. Containers sat on terminal grounds longer than normal because the Alameda Corridor, the dedicated freight rail running 20 miles north from the ports, was at capacity. Trucking companies couldn't retrieve containers fast enough to free space for new arrivals. Every piece of the system was connected. Every piece was stuck. Port officials coordinated with carriers to adjust arrival scheduling. Rail companies extended operating windows. Container terminals ran additional night shifts. Slowly, through late November and into December, the backup cleared. The solution was operational, doing more of the same things faster, not changing anything structurally. An automotive assembly plant in Tennessee shut down for 4 days at peak backup. Japanese-made transmissions, sitting in a container on an anchored ship off Los Angeles, never arrived. The Tennessee plant wasn't malfunctioning. Its workers weren't sick. Its supply chain had hit a wall 2,000 miles away that no one in Tennessee had any mechanism to address. What this tells us about how infrastructure decisions actually get made is more honest than most economic analyses admit. Systems don't become fragile through neglect or bad management. They become fragile through competence. Every rational decision, made by rational actors with good information, moves a system toward peak efficiency and away from redundancy. The fragility is the product of doing things correctly, individually. After 2021, the federal government invested. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act directed money towards Savannah, Gulf Coast ports, East Coast gateways. Savannah's expansion was substantial. Houston deepened its channel. Baltimore modernized. These were real improvements that gave the network more capacity and modest redundancy at the margins. But nobody built a second Los Angeles. What Los Angeles and Long Beach represent isn't cranes and berths. It's 50 years of accumulated ecosystem. Chassis fleets whose operators are geographically centered in Southern California. Warehouse networks built around these two ports as destinations. Trucking companies whose routes center on the Alameda Corridor. Customs brokers, freight forwarders, third-party logistics firms, an entire industry organized around a specific location. You can build the physical infrastructure in 5 years. You cannot replicate the ecosystem in any time frame that matters for policy. Here's the take that will get us pushback. The real reason 2021 didn't produce structural change isn't political dysfunction or lobbying. Structural change is economically prohibitive given what already exists. The system works so efficiently when it functions that duplicating it, in capital, in coordinated industry behavior, in the time required to shift supply chains, exceeds what any realistic crisis justifies in a standard cost-benefit analysis. The problem is the analysis only holds until the day it doesn't. There's a line from the 2021 congressional hearings that stayed with me. A port official called Los Angeles and Long Beach the circulatory system of the American economy. He meant it as a point of pride, an argument for investment. But circulatory systems have a property he didn't mention. You can live with one kidney. You can function without a spleen. The circulatory system, heart, aorta, the major veins, you cannot work around. When that system fails, nothing else in the body compensates. The two ports aren't just large. They're handling goods the rest of the supply chain cannot reroute in any realistic time frame. Pharmaceutical inputs, electronics components for factories with no domestic substitute, automotive parts for assembly lines scheduled to the hour, time-sensitive goods for which rerouting takes 18 months to implement, not 18 days. Put yourself in the shoes of the Omaha coordinator right now. The tracker shows containers moving. The ports are running at record throughput. Wait times are down. The operational improvements made after 2021 worked. Has the fundamental condition changed? If the ports jam again, a labor dispute, a seismic event, a disruption in Pacific shipping lanes, what's the contingency? For most companies in her position, the honest answer is the same as it was in October 2021. There isn't one. Is there a single bottleneck in your industry, something your entire operation depends on that almost nobody mentions until it breaks? Drop it in the comments. We read every one. If you want to understand how geography becomes infrastructure, becomes dependency, becomes trap, that's exactly what MAP does. Subscribe. The efficiency logic that concentrated 40% of American imports in 2 ports is still running. Every carrier routing its largest vessel to the deepest available berth. Every warehouse choosing the site closest to the established network. Every retailer building its supply chain around the cheapest reliable option. The system is optimized. It is optimized for a world where nothing goes wrong simultaneously at 2 specific locations on a 6-mile stretch of the California coast. Will a significant disruption hit the ports again in the next 5 years? Comment yes or no. We want to see what this audience predicts. The cranes at Pier 400 are running today. The container ships are moving up the main channel. The Alameda Corridor is carrying freight north toward the rail yards. The coordinator in Omaha opens her tracker. Green across the board. For now.